Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on the VBA's Research Grant Program for 2022. Before we begin, please note that this session is being recorded and a link to the recording will be made available on the VBA's website. Today, we will provide an overview of the grant program and this year's focus, and we'll address frequently asked questions. We have allocated time towards the end to answer audience questions raised during the webinar. You have joined today in listen-only mode, so we encourage you to submit questions via the Q&A function on the bottom toolbar of your screen. Our speakers today are State Building Surveyor Andrew Cellini and Samantha Adricum, who manage the VBA's research program. As a State Building Surveyor, Andrew is an industry advocate and brings a wealth of knowledge to this important role, with more than 30 years of industry experience. Andrew is passionate about the industry and its future. He has led the creation and implementation of the Code of Conduct for building surveyors to improve standards, trust and oversight in the buildings industry, and helps keep Victorians safe. I'll now hand over to State Building Surveyor Andrew Cellini.
Thanks, Shivak. I'd like to welcome you all to today's information session and thank you for your interest in VBA's Research Grant Program. I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered, wherever that may be, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. We're pleased to have so many people joining us today, with around 60 registrations from 20 different educational institutions across 6 Australian states and territories. The VBA is a statutory authority that regulates the building and plumbing industries in Victoria. Our role is to protect the community and ensure that the built environment is safe and is of quality. And one of the VBA's functions is to conduct and promote research that is relevant to the regulation of the building and plumbing industries. We use this research to develop the evidence base that inform our regulatory decisions, that influences policy and regulatory frameworks, and supports a thriving and informed industry with good practices and skilled and competent practitioners. The one way that we deliver our research function is through our research grant program. Following an enthusiastic response to the inaugural round of the grant program in 2021, with 56 applications submitted, we were encouraged to continue the program in 2022. This year, we're inviting applications from researchers at education institutions for grants for research targeted at minimising moisture ingress, condensation and water damage in buildings. The impact of these issues can be significant. It can negatively impact on human health and the structural integrity of buildings. Many factors can contribute to moisture ingress and condensation. Some of those being design decisions that may make it more complicated to effectively waterproof buildings, or which may exceed the technical abilities of designers and builders to design and construct watertight buildings. Poor and non-compliant design documentation or detailing, for example, not incorporating sufficient construction detail, resulting in poor quality or non-compliant work. Non-compliant design and or construction of balconies, roofing systems and wet areas. Post-construction activity, for example, penetrations through walls or into balcony floors as a result of installing services like air conditioning units. The impact of weathering on construction materials during construction, and increased insulation and decreased ventilation provisions in modern construction. Addressing the issues that contribute to moisture ingress, condensation and water damage, and hence preventing it from occurring, is considered to be an important priority for the construction industry. We're looking for proposals from Australia's talented researchers that are focused on providing evidence-based research that will help us tackle these issues, and that can be translated into or contribute to the development of practical solutions for adoption by the industry that will eventually benefit the entire community. Applications for the second round of the grant program opened in January, and I'm excited by the opportunities that the program represents. I'll now hand over to Samantha to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Andrew, and good afternoon to those of you who are joining us today. Sorry. Just having a problem with the slides. Here we go. So as Andrew advised, the VBA is responsible for regulating the building and the plumbing industries in Victoria. And our functions are broad and they influence the focus of the VBA's research program. So I just want to spend a moment to touch on some of those functions. So the functions include administering licensing and registration schemes for building and plumbing practitioners, monitoring practitioner conduct and enforcing compliance with the Building Act, participating in the development of national standards and monitoring developments in relation to those standards and providing information and advice on standards. And that could be to industry or to consumers or back to those standards bodies. And conducting and promoting research relevant to the regulation of the building and the plumbing industries, which we do through our research program. So our research program is overseen by the VBA board through its Research and Innovation Committee, and this committee meets quarterly. So the program comprises VBA managed research and sponsored research. So how do we deliver the program? So we conduct the research internally, or we may procure it from external providers, which could be universities or private sector, or we sponsor research such as through the grant program. We also participate in broader research programs. For example, we're a participant in the Building 4.0 Cooperative Research Centre, which is in its second year at the moment. For all of the research that we consider participating in, we first consider the potential outcomes and impacts that that proposed research could deliver. Now, our research focus is directed towards 3 strategic outcomes. So safe or safer building work with fewer major defects, skilled and competent practitioners, and a technologically advanced and innovative industry. And as Andrew mentioned, we use the research insights to develop the evidence base to inform our regulatory decisions, to influence policy and regulatory frameworks, and to support a thriving and informed industry. The research we conduct and the research that we support is that which we think will make a difference, will have an impact. And we're concerned to ensure that the research insights and findings are communicated and that opportunities identified through research are pursued to ensure that it has that positive impact. So we don't just complete the research and put it on a shelf and say done. We do report to the board regularly on the flow-on effects from the research that we conducted and the impact that it's making. Now about the grant program itself. So we're looking to support research that will help us perform our regulatory functions. We're often invited by academic researchers to provide financial or in-kind support for proposed research. And we do and have in the past supported requests to participate in research through those approaches. But these proposals often have very short timeframes for us to respond to, and we need to refer these proposals to our research committee to consider. And remember, that meets quarterly. And often there's not enough detail provided for us to properly consider the proposal. So the grant program provides structure for academic researchers who are requesting VBA support. It provides a window for researchers to propose their research ideas to us. And it informs researchers through the application form and our communications about particular themes of the level of detail we need to properly consider a proposal. Additionally, the program provides an avenue to access research support to those who may not have thought of approaching us in the past. So we've communicated the program widely to encourage people to pursue that avenue. The program also expands our research network and understanding of the expertise and the research that we can draw upon, which might be broader than just through this research grant program. So while an application for a grant may not be successful, it does increase our awareness of the research interests and expertise out there that we might draw upon at a later time, or we might be able to facilitate connections to other appropriate sources of support. So in terms of last year's grant round, we had a really enthusiastic response with 56 applications from 17 different education providers across 6 jurisdictions. In 2021, we didn't limit the research focus other than requiring alignment with our regulatory functions and key strategic research outcomes of safe or safer building work, improved practitioner competencies, and a technologically advanced and innovative industry. The applications that we received reflected broad themes on building defects, building inspections, building design, fire safety, practitioner competencies, construction waste, and consumer awareness. All of the applications were assessed by the assessment panel against published selection criteria. Ultimately, 6 applications were shortlisted by the panel for consideration by the board's research committee, and these related to building defects, building design, and fire safety. And ultimately, the board approved grants to 3 applicants, being the University of Tasmania, Deakin University, and RMIT University, and for all of those grants, we've got information on our website. So while we proceeded with 3 research grants, there were many strong applications. And so what stood out in those stronger applications? Out of the 56 applications that we received, the stronger applications shared common features. There was a clear and concise description of the issue or the problem with supporting evidence. Applicants had clearly articulated research objectives and deliverables. And there was a strong alignment to the VBA's regulatory functions and the outcomes that we're seeking. The methodology was clearly articulated and demonstrated how the research objectives would be met. Where there was data to be collected, there was a clear description of the data that would be sourced or sought to be sourced. And that included what data, from where, by whom, and for what purpose. Also, the applicants had confirmed industry partners that would contribute to the research. Now, some of that was a financial contribution and some was in kind. So it wasn't always about the dollars that a partner could contribute to the research, but the expertise. We also found in these applications that were stronger that the university was contributing to the cost of the research in some way. And generally that was through contribution to the salaries of the research staff for that research. So the VBA wasn't being asked to support the full cost. We saw that applicants in those stronger applications demonstrated appropriate oversight arrangements for the conduct of the research. And they also demonstrated that there was appropriate project management arrangements in place. Importantly, potential risks to project success and mitigation strategies were clear, and we considered them to be appropriate in the circumstances. These applicants demonstrated that there had been depth in considering risks and mitigation strategies, and it provided us with confidence that there were sound plans in place to deal with potential risks should they arise and still be able to deliver on the research objectives. Additionally, there was a reasonable timeframe for delivery of the research findings and insights. And for research of longer duration, there were deliverables at various stages along that research program. And finally, the VBA felt that we could do something practical with the research insights in the short to medium term that would have an impact. So, thinking about your applications in 2022, hopefully that can provide some guidance for what made those applications stand out. So for the 2022 round, we have a narrower focus. So we've invited applications for research aimed at reducing moisture ingress and water damage, condensation in buildings. As our state building surveyor indicated earlier, the impact of moisture ingress, water damage and condensation to human health and building structural integrity can be significant. And addressing these issues is considered to be an important priority for the construction industry. So we're looking to support research that will find or contribute to new and innovative solutions to minimise these issues and the damage that they cause. Examples of how this could be achieved are through improved building and plumbing practices, improved skills and competency amongst practitioners, or opportunities to reform codes, standards, and the regulatory framework, or all of the above. So now to our timeframe. So applications close on Monday, the 14th of March. We'll be assessing applications throughout March and April. Now, we may ask for more information in this phase, but that's unlikely. But don't assume that we will ask. So please ensure that you address the requirements in the application form clearly and concisely. If you're missing information, it's unlikely we'll pursue it. In May and June, we'll be shortlisting and recommending applications for a final decision by the VBA board. So in this phase, particularly in that shortlisting, we may wish to get in touch with you to discuss applications in more detail and learn a little bit more about the specifics. Now, I'll speak about the assessment process in more detail shortly. We'll advise applicants of the outcome of their application in July. And also in July or early August, we'll be settling funding agreements for successful applications. Now, there is a template funding agreement on the VBA website, and I do encourage you to look at that before submitting an application to understand the conditions that the VBA will be seeking to attach to a grant. The funding agreements and the research would be expected to commence from August onwards. So in terms of our assessment process, applications will be assessed against published selection criteria, which I'll touch on shortly. Those criteria are published on our website. So from March to April, the applications will be assessed by an assessment panel, and that comprises the State Building Surveyor, Andrew Cellini, our Chief Analyst, Shabini Mahendra, and a member of the Research and Innovation Committee. The panel will review and shortlist applications for consideration by the committee. In May, the Research Committee will consider the shortlist prepared by the panel. They'll be briefed on all the other applications submitted as well that haven't made it to that shortlist. And then the committee will make a recommendation to the board about which applications should be supported through a grant, the amounts that should be made available, and any conditions that should be attached to that grant that are over and above those that are in the funding agreement template. Ultimately, the VBA board will make decisions on successful applications. Now, during that assessment phase, we may ask for further information, but like I said before, don't assume we will. The panel may seek advice from technical staff or external technical advisors. Now, if this occurs, conflict of interest declarations and confidentiality agreements will be required, and those people won't be involved in the assessment decisions in any way. Now onto the selection criteria. So we have 4 selection criteria. So we're looking for impact, the methodology, the viability to deliver, and value for money for the VBA. The assessment panel members will individually assess applications against these criteria and assign a rating against each. So high demonstrates very well, medium demonstrates moderately well, or low demonstrates poorly or fails to demonstrate. Where there are differences between those individual assessments, the panel will come together to discuss and to reach an agreement. There's a variety of factors the panel will take into account in assigning a rating for each criteria. For example, for value for money, the panel will consider factors such as the likely impact of the research, the total cost of the research, the proportion of that total cost that's being sought from the VBA, what other reputable organisations are contributing, the amount being contributed by the university, the impact on VBA resources for providing in-kind support and for monitoring the progress of the grant agreement and the research, and the extent to which project success is dependent upon access to VBA input. It'll also take into account the timeframe for delivery and whether the grant would be a low or high risk investment for the VBA. So the ratings that the panel applies really support the shortlisting process, and then applications that score higher against each of those criteria areas are more likely to be considered for shortlisting and will help guide the final decision made by the board. So now to some of the frequently, or the most common frequently asked questions. The big one, how much funding is available? So our board hasn't set a cap for individual grants, and we're not disclosing the overall program budget, but it's not an unlimited budget. We may decide to partially fund research, so not fully fund, so not award the full amount being sought. So I do suggest consider breaking your research program into smaller components where it's a larger piece, a modular type approach where there may be foundational research that we'd like to support, which can provide a solid foundation for other research down the track. And consider identifying other research partners that have got expertise that they can contribute to the research. We're open to participating in projects with other contributors, but we will want to know who they are up front in your application form. Now, last year, the VBA's financial contributions ranged from between 30 to 70,000, plus significant in-kind support. And in these projects, the overall costs were higher than the VBA's contribution. There were partners and they were providing in-kind and, in some instances, financial support, and the university was contributing as well. So the impact was considered to be great, and the cost to the VBA wasn't as high as it could have been without all of those other partners and their expertise involved. So ultimately, we're looking to support research that represents good value for money for the VBA and the use of those public funds. So is there a time limit for completing the research? We're looking for a return on our investment within a reasonable time. We're looking to support research that's going to help us perform our regulatory functions and deal with the issues that need to be dealt with. We do appreciate that some research will require a longer time frame to complete. But in a research program of a longer duration, we'll still want to see progress along the way that will help us perform our role. The duration of successful applications in 2021, the research programs ranged from 10 months to 18 months. Will there be restrictions on how the grant funding can be used? Yes, there will be, and this will be reflected in a funding agreement, and the template is available on our website for you to view. Do encourage you to review that before submitting an application. So our financial contribution is largely intended as a contribution to the salaries of the researchers at the educational institution. We're not expecting it to cover the costs of research funded through other sources or research activity that's already been completed. We're not intending it to cover the cost for core operating expenses, noting, however, that the salary component will include a proportion for on costs for those staff. It's not intended to provide the successful applicants to procure the private sector to undertake the research. It's not intended for infrastructure that the education institution should provide or has already purchased. So what kind of in-kind support can the VBA provide? We're open to suggestions from applicants on this on a case-by-case basis, but our in-kind support may include access to case studies or information we hold or data we hold, subject to there being no confidentiality issues and privacy considerations. It could also include access to regulatory staff and technical specialists and experts at the VBA. Could be for reviewing technical specifications for a test of some kind, or reviewing and advising on provisions in the National Construction Code or Australian standards. Or it could be about being interviewed about regulatory or technical matters for the purposes of the research. So it will include reviewing and providing feedback on draft research reports or other deliverables. So we do expect to be able to view drafts and comment on drafts along the way and have that feedback taken on board. We'll also take into account the impact on VBA resources in providing the in-kind support that's being sought. So we do expect to be involved in some way, and we do expect you to articulate the nature of that in-kind support you're seeking in your application. And I suppose a tip is provide detail on what you're seeking from us and how it will assist. For example, don't just say access to data. Tell us what kind of data, why it's required, how it will be used, and how it will assist the research. Show us that you've thought about what and how we can contribute. So why is the grant limited to educational institutions? As I mentioned earlier, we're approached regularly throughout the year, largely by universities to support research through financial and in-kind contributions. And we have contributed to research via that avenue. However, the VBA board wanted a more structured approach to engagement with the education sector on research opportunities resulting in this program. Also recognising the unique position and abilities of researchers to provide academic expertise in rigorous research. And this is why the program is targeted specifically at the education sector. Provides structured approach and a window for universities to approach us for support. Shows you the level of detail we need to properly consider applications. And it also articulates our research focus and provides an indication of where we're likely to direct our resources. And importantly, it's not limited to the education sector in Victoria. And the final frequent FAQ is, can I discuss my research proposal with someone at the VBA? So to ensure fairness to all applicants, we're not providing feedback on the merits or likely success of research ideas and proposals. However, we can provide clarification on the intent of the grant program and the outcomes that we're seeking through it. It will most likely be me that you engage with if you've got questions, and I won't be involved in the assessment of applications in any way. So I've now addressed the most common questions that we received. There are more on our website, which were raised through last year's webinar and emails post the webinar. But I'll now open it up to questions from you. So Shevak, have we had any questions from attendees today?
Hi Sam, looking a little, oh, we've just got one that came in. From Medi, how likely would the VBA be interested in a new smart technology to detect moisture ingress in different materials used for construction?
Well, it's difficult for me to answer that directly, but I think if the proposed research will address or minimise the likelihood of water ingress or moisture damage or condensation in buildings, then that's exactly the scope of the grant program this year. And, you know, it may be something that's supported. It's about the strength of the application against all of those criteria that I mentioned earlier.
It's for murdering, not for reducing. That's what they've just added in.
Sorry, repeat that, please.
For monitoring, not for reducing.
Potentially, and this is where it's we're looking to applicants to demonstrate how it's relevant.
And Andrew's just popped his hand up. Andrew, did you want to join us?
Yeah, I agree with Sam. We'll have to have a look in more detail, but I suspect that there would be some benefit in monitoring, because that could be used as early detection in regards to identifying issues that could feed into future research as to cause, but also prevention, so that if we can actually get in earlier. A lot of the issues that we're seeing is that the moisture ingress is not identified for a long period of time, and then it becomes more costly to rectify. So the earlier that you can actually identify that there is an issue, the better.
That was our only question. I was wondering if anybody else had any questions that can pop into the Q&A box. Give it a minute, sorry.
I must have done very well then, Shivak.
I think so. Well, we've got one from Matthew. Do you need to be a research organisation from Victoria?
No, it's not limited to Victorian education providers. It's Australia-wide.
One from Hassan. Any specific part of building is focused? Is there any specific part of the building?
No, I think we want to minimise the issue regardless of the building type or part of the building. We want to minimise the issue. So it would be, we're open to all proposals.
And then another question, is there an email address for later questions?
Yes, research@vba.vic.gov.au. That's in the slide, the next slide that's coming up. Also, there's on our website, on the research grant page on the website, you'll find an email link if you've got questions.
Is there a standardised grant application template for proposals?
There's an application form which is available on the website, and we are expecting applications to be lodged in that format. We won't accept applications lodged in an alternative format, and that's because it sets out the information we require, and it also helps us find the information more easily when applications are all presented in a consistent manner.
Okay. And that looks about it for questions.
Okay. Well, if people do think of questions after the webinar, feel free to send an email. So the webinar and the slides will be published online in the next few business days. We'll be updating the FAQs on our website if we get questions that aren't already covered there. And the next step after that is to submit applications by the 14th of March by email to research@vba.vic.gov.au, and that's the same email address for submitting questions. So we do appreciate the time that you've taken to join us today, and we hope that we've provided useful information. We really are looking forward to receiving applications and engaging with you further. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.